It's time for the Daily Stand Up Podcast presented by AgileDad with your host, Lee Henson. Without any further ado, let's get started. I'm hearing a lot of concern about leadership, specifically remote leadership. Some people are saying that it's hard to lead a remote team. So I thought I would give you a top three list of three ways to excel as a remote leader. And in all honesty, I believe that remote leadership is actually it's a superpower that some people have. I mean, I've seen some really, really strong remote leaders, and I've seen others who couldn't fight their way out of a paper bag. But it's one of these things where if you know it, you know it. And if you're good, you're good. So let's talk about remote leadership. First and foremost, remote leadership is not the same for everyone. It's not the same for every company. It's not the same for every person. It's also full of plenty of myths. If you talk to people who have remote teams that have been successful, people who have shown that they can work with one or more teams remotely and that they're hitting it out of the park every single time. Or if you have a newly acquired remote team or you're already leading one, there's just a few points you should consider. And they're things that I see as a common thread across all these leaders. So I thought it'd be fun to share them with you. So let's go through the myths first. So here's the myths. Let's go with myth number one. Remote leadership is something new, and it's something that's being forced upon us because of lockdowns. That's not true. Remote leadership has been around for as long as I can remember. Remote leadership has been around for a very, very, very long time. And it's one of those things where, we've had teams that work in other countries or in other locales, and we've had leaders that were based here in the US or in Europe. And it's not something new. And it wasn't just something created because of lockdowns. I mean, did COVID have something to do with it? Well, absolutely. It became more prevalent, but it doesn't mean that it's for everyone. All right, let's continue. Another myth: you cannot have a successful culture with people working remotely. That's not true either. And I can tell you this one firsthand. I've done lots of culture activities with my teams that are remote teams all over the world. And we've learned about each other's cultures, about holidays, about recipes, about dancing, about all kinds of stuff. And what I can tell you is I've often seen that culture with remote teams is sometimes stronger than culture with teams that are working together side by side at desks and cubicles. What I'm trying to say is that is something that you can overcome if you know how to approach it. And the final myth is you need people in the office to be working productively. Now, this is one that's interesting. How about this? I won't say that you need people in the office to be working productively, but I will say you need the right people working remotely to be productive. There, I said it. I think too often we look at the Elon Musk principle, and I've dubbed this the honeymoon period. And I've said the honeymoon period is over. And many people look at me and they go, "What do you mean by that?" Well, when COVID first happened and people started working from home, everyone was excited to work from home. People didn't have places to go, people didn't have things to do. They were excited to be working from home. They put their effort into it, and they really, let their A game shine through, and they did everything they could to continue that practice, and things were good. Then, shortly after COVID dissipated, as much as it has, and we start to see people who are still working from home. People are starting to look at working from home more as a convenience. Now, it's a cost savings to the company. But when you start addressing it as a convenience, people say, "Oh, well, I just have to run to the store real quick, or I'm going to take the dog for a walk, or I need a quick break, or I need to, go to a doctor's appointment or a dental appointment." It's almost as if they regard working from home as something that has been bestowed upon them as a right as opposed to a privilege. And what we're seeing is that the tasks that would normally take people 1 to 2 hours if you follow like a homeschooling model is taking people 8, 10, 12, 14 hours all day, dripping into the next day. And I think part of it is just that people want to do the best job they can, but at the same time, they also understand that they have gaps in their day where they can do things. And I think the whole thing is they don't understand the cost of context switching. And they certainly don't understand the cost of interruption. And if you put those two together, it's actually making it more and more expensive for companies to do business this way. So while you don't need people in an office to be productive, you need the right people to be working remotely to be productive there. So done right, remote teams can win for leaders, for businesses, for members of your team. But many large companies have always run some teams home base. like a sales force, for example, where each person covers a region or a territory and they're based from their home state. Other companies operate across borders, but with only one or two representatives in each area. And there you have different problems, maybe different time zones or different languages or really diverse cultures. But when you talk to people who've done this successfully, they've smashed these problems and they've been doing it successfully before anyone ever mentioned the word pandemic. So before COVID was even a blink in someone's eye, they had already been doing this for a while successfully. When the pandemic appeared, businesses were suddenly forced to swap from office to at home working. And people were announcing that, oh my goodness, it's impossible for me to keep up with everything that's going on, or it's impossible for me to understand all the culture. We're not even under one roof. And then other people said, this is great working from home, but they made things drag out for longer than they should. And I think that what leadership needs to recognize here is that the culture can happen, but you need to allow it to happen. And I think that's a struggle that a lot of leaders in agile organizations face. They want the culture, they just don't know how to let go of the reins and let it happen. So I think it breaks down into just a few factors. So the first one is people have to want to work remotely. I mean, I'll tell you right now, I love working from home. I always have. I mean, as much as I love, I mean, don't get me wrong, if I'm teaching, I'd rather be in front of a classroom. But if I'm not teaching, I enjoy being home. I enjoy being close to family. I enjoy being close to doing all the creature comforts and things that I need to do. There's something to be said about sitting in an office and recording a podcast. But it's just one of those things, if I had to go to an office for 8 hours a day, would I do it? And I can tell you, I would, but it would be a lot harder than the conveniences that I have now between the commute and all the other things, etc. But, if you think about running meetings, chatting with people, taking a few calls, if you think of thinking work, organizing, strategic planning, these all require a different level of participation and a different level of attention span in order for you to be executing those correctly. So I think what I'm trying to say is depending on the situation and depending on the types of products or services you're building and depending on how long your team has been working remote and whether you have an established remote work culture, this could be something really good or really bad. There are lots of people out there who are more distressed and more frustrated than they ever have been before because of the work from home environment. There are other people who say, I hope I never have to set foot in an office again. It really does depend. And that's the hardest answer to give because every situation is unique and different. But as Elon Musk said, if you are going to work from home, you need to make it count. You can't just make it a honeymoon where you're just, or the after effects of the honeymoon where, okay, the honeymoon's over, now we're back to reality. And people aren't doing their best or aren't putting their best effort in. I think what it all boils down to is intent. The people who are doing the work and the companies who are making it work, they have to want to work like that. They have to have desire. They can't be forced to do it. It can't be because of a lockdown or because of a struggle. It has to be because as a culture and as an organization, we want to adapt to that change. All right, let's go to number 2. Our second one, leadership styles need to adapt. Hey, that's us. One of the aspects leaders and managers struggle with, especially if they're running new remote teams, is control. Or rather, letting go of control, I should say, right? Let go of the reins. When you're doing office-based management and you're used to knowing where people are and what they're doing at all times, it's hard for you to let go in a remote world because, well, people are working with the noise of small children in the background or a dog in someone's lap or a pile of unwashed dishes or laundry in the background. You're worried about team members that are still in pajamas or worse, when they're dressed from the waist up and, we don't even want to know what's happening from the waist down. But, the thing is, if it really isn't anybody else's business what people are doing in their homes. Think about that for a minute. If you're working from home, is it your business to know what people are doing and to know what their background looks like and whether they have clean dishes or not? None of those things have anything to do with the way they're performing at the office. But those same leaders are used to having set hours and expect remote teams to be available at those hours too. And some people just become irate when people don't conform to those wishes. But if work's done well, we as leaders need to let go of the reins and say, who cares? And not try to press a standard just for the sake of doing so. Okay, let's look at the third one. It's the secret of good bonding. So much of the advice on managing remote teams revolves around continual one-to-one check-ins with people mixed with a barrage of other group-led meetings. And The reality is that people don't miss seeing the boss. Some will consider it a blessing, even. But the last thing they want to feel is like they're being checked up on. So it's important for us to establish camaraderie across the teams, but you don't want to feel like someone's always riding you to make sure things are in a certain state, etc. So if you forget about checking up on people and just take that same energy and go about creating a community, you could recruit people who enjoy bonding and avoid the antisocial loners who would be happy being overlooked. Choose people who are genuinely inspired by the vision of the company, that love what they do and understand the target audience and what the problem is they're trying to solve. It gives them instant common ground with the rest of the team and a sense of multiple mutual purpose. Uh, they can create the most amazing onboarding program to cement that, and encourage teams to feel part of the thing they're working on from day one, and to really embrace and understand everything. And then, of course, you should have occasional meetups in person, but it shouldn't be something where you're just constantly barraging or checking in on people. But make sure you do things like team building as well, whether it's charity runs, beach cleaning, a night out on the town, whatever it is. Ask the team to come up with suggestions. Let them tell you. And I think that if you can navigate the culture, and if you can navigate the psychological safety and create the container where all this can happen, you can enjoy the benefits of having really powerful remote teams. Okay, that's going to do it. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you have a topic you want us to discuss, learn more at AgileDad.com. We'd love to hear from you. As always, we encourage you to stay healthy, stay well, and stay agile, my friends. Until next time, do take care.